Tonight, before you go to sleep, try a small experiment. Walk through your home and imagine that every source of fire suddenly dissipates. Not just your stove, not just your lighter. Every flame, forever. No candles, no campfires, no fireplaces, no way to boil water, no way to cook food, no way to stay warm when winter arrives. Now imagine something even stranger. Your phone still works, your house still stands, the modern world is still around you, but every technology that ultimately traces back to humanity's control of fire has vanished. How long would you last? A week? A month? Maybe less than you think. Because fire is so deeply woven into human life that most of us rarely notice it. It cooks our meals, protects us from the cold, lights the darkness, shapes metal, powers industries, and in many ways, helped create the civilization you know today. But here is the question that archaeologists, anthropologists, and evolutionary scientists have spent decades trying to answer. If fire is so important, how did our ancestors survive before they had it? Because for a very long time, they did. For hundreds of thousands of years, possibly even longer, humans walked across dangerous landscapes without carrying a flame wherever they went. They faced freezing nights. They ate food that had never touched a fire. They shared a world with predators that could easily outrun, outclimb, or overpower them. And yet somehow they survived. Not only survived, they spread, they adapted, they endured long enough to become us. At first glance, that seems almost impossible. After all, if modern humans struggle during a power outage that lasts a few hours, how could our ancestors live entire lifetimes without the single invention that would eventually transform everything? The answer is far more fascinating than you might expect, because before humans mastered fire, they had already mastered something else. Something that may have been even more important. And that story begins in a world where every sunset brought darkness, every winter brought danger, and every day was a test of whether your family would see tomorrow. Most people picture early humans in a very specific way. A small group huddled inside a cave, a fire burning at the entrance, chunks of meat roasting over the flames, the darkness held safely outside by flickering orange light. It is one of the most familiar images in human history. There is only one problem. For much of our existence, that image is almost certainly wrong. The earliest members of our human family did not begin their journey with fire, and they certainly did not spend every night gathered around a campfire telling stories beneath cave ceilings. In fact, some of the oldest human ancestors may have lived for hundreds of thousands of years before they gained reliable control over fire. That means there was a time when sunset truly changed everything. When daylight faded, the world belonged to something else. To understand how extraordinary this is, imagine waking up tomorrow in a landscape nearly 2 million years ago. You are not a modern human. You are one of the early members of the genus Homo. Your brain is growing larger than that of your ape ancestors, but you are still physically vulnerable. You cannot run as fast as many predators. You do not have claws. You do not have sharp fangs. You do not have shelters built from stone or wood. And most importantly, you have no way to create fire whenever you need it. For a long time, scientists assumed that early humans must have depended heavily on caves. After all, caves seem like the perfect refuge. They provide shade, protection from rain, and some defense against the elements. But archaeological evidence paints a much more complicated picture. Many ancient human sites are not caves at all. They are open-air camps scattered across ancient grasslands, riverbanks, and woodland edges. In other words, your ancestors often lived directly in the landscape itself, not hidden from nature, but immersed within it. That may sound reckless, yet there was a reason. Caves were not empty houses waiting for humans to move in. They were already occupied. Hyenas used them. Large cats used them. Bears used them. Sometimes the most dangerous place to spend the night was the cave that looked safest. So instead of relying entirely on caves, early humans became something remarkable. They became experts at reading the environment. A cluster of trees could provide cover. A rocky outcrop could create a natural barrier. A riverbank could offer water and visibility at the same time. Every evening became a decision. Where can you sleep? Where can you see danger coming? Where can your group stay together until sunrise? And this reveals something important. The real story of human survival before fire was not a story about strength. It was a story about adaptation. Your ancestors did not survive because they were the strongest creatures in the landscape. They survived because they learned to think differently. They watched, they remembered, they cooperated, they anticipated danger before it arrived. And that ability may have been far more valuable than any flame. But finding a place to sleep was only the beginning. Because even if you found shelter for the night, another challenge was waiting for you the next morning. A challenge that affected every hour of every day. You had to find enough food to stay alive, and without fire, that task was far harder than most people realize. Imagine waking up hungry. Not the kind of hunger that makes you glance at a refrigerator, not the kind that sends you to a grocery store. The kind of hunger that follows you from sunrise to sunset because every calorie you consume must be found, gathered, chased, or stolen from the landscape around you. And without fire, finding food was only half the battle. The real challenge was extracting enough energy from it to survive. Today, cooking is so ordinary that most people never think about what it actually does. A few minutes over heat can soften vegetables, break down fibers, kill harmful microbes, and make nutrients easier to absorb. Cooking is, in a way, a form of pre-digestion. The fire does part of the work before your body has to. But your ancestors did not have that advantage. Everything they ate had to be processed by their own teeth, jaws, stomachs, and intestines. Every root was tougher, every plant was harder to digest. Every piece of meat demanded more chewing. In some cases, food that takes you 10 minutes to eat today might have required an hour or more of effort. Now imagine doing that every single day. Scientists studying modern primates have noticed something interesting. Chimpanzees can spend 5 or more hours a day simply chewing food. Their lives revolve around finding enough energy to replace the energy they are constantly spending. Early humans likely faced similar challenges. Your day was not divided into work, entertainment, exercise, and relaxation. Your day was food, finding it, processing it, sharing it, protecting it, then repeating the process tomorrow. But here is where the mystery becomes even more fascinating. Around 2 million years ago, something unusual began happening. The brains of early humans started growing larger, not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily, and large brains are expensive. The human brain consumes enormous amounts of energy compared to most other organs. Even today, your brain uses roughly 20% of your body's energy while making up only a small fraction of your weight. That creates a puzzle. How could early humans support increasingly larger brains while relying entirely on raw food? For decades, scientists have debated this question. Some researchers believe early humans began eating more meat. Others suggest they became better at scavenging animal carcasses left behind by larger predators. Still others argue that improved stone tools allowed them to access nutritious marrow hidden inside bones. Whatever the exact answer, one thing seems clear. Your ancestors were becoming remarkably creative in their search for calories. Imagine spotting a group of vultures circling in the distance. To most animals, that means danger. To an early human, it might mean opportunity. Somewhere nearby, a large animal has died. If you arrive before the hyenas finish their meal, there may still be scraps of meat. There may be fat. There may be marrow. Resources that could mean the difference between surviving and starving. Of course, reaching those resources was never easy. You were not the only creature searching for food. The African landscape was crowded with competitors. Hyenas had powerful jaws. Big cats had speed and strength. Even smaller scavengers were constantly searching for the same opportunities. So how could a relatively weak human compete? The answer was not muscle. It was cooperation. A lone human was vulnerable. A group was something entirely different. Several individuals working together could spot danger sooner, defend a food source longer, carry resources farther, and share information that no single person could gather alone. In other words, before humans mastered fire, they may already have been mastering teamwork, and that ability was becoming one of the most powerful survival tools ever developed. But food was only one part of the struggle. Even if your group found enough calories to survive the day, another threat was waiting every evening, a threat that arrived with every sunset. Because once darkness covered the landscape, the balance of power changed completely. As the sun sinks below the horizon, the world begins to change. The grasslands that felt open and familiar during the day become something entirely different. Shadows stretch across the landscape. Colors disappear. Sounds become harder to identify. And somewhere beyond the darkness, eyes are watching. Today, most of us experience darkness as an inconvenience. You flip a switch, turn on a flashlight, unlock your phone. Within seconds, the darkness retreats. Your ancestors had no such luxury. When night arrived, it arrived completely. And without fire, there was no reliable way to push it back. This may have been one of the greatest challenges early humans ever faced. Because humans are not naturally equipped for life after sunset. Unlike owls, you cannot see well in low light. Unlike wolves, you cannot track scents across great distances. Unlike many predators, you are not designed to hunt in darkness. Night placed your ancestors at a disadvantage, and that meant survival depended on finding solutions long before the first controlled flame appeared. The first solution was surprisingly simple: stay together. Imagine sitting among a small group as darkness settles over the landscape. You hear distant calls, rustling grass, unknown movements beyond the edge of your vision. Alone, every sound feels threatening, but surrounded by others, the risk changes. Many eyes can watch different directions. Many ears can detect subtle noises. Many individuals can react faster than one. This is one reason scientists believe social cooperation became so important in human evolution. A group was more than a collection of individuals. It was a survival technology. But that was not the only adaptation. Your ancestors also became experts at choosing where to spend the night. A slight rise in the terrain could provide visibility. Dense vegetation might offer concealment. Rock formations could create natural barriers. Each evening required careful judgment. A poor choice might expose the group to danger. A good choice could dramatically improve their odds of making it to morning. But even that was not the most remarkable solution. The most remarkable solution was happening inside the human mind. Because when physical advantages are limited, intelligence becomes increasingly valuable. Imagine remembering where predators were seen last week, remembering which paths were safer, remembering where water sources attracted dangerous animals after dark. Every useful piece of information increased your chances of survival. In a sense, your ancestors were building mental maps long before they built cities, and those maps may have saved countless lives. But there was another challenge waiting beyond the darkness: cold. Without fire, cold was not merely uncomfortable, it could become a serious threat. You could not warm your hands beside a campfire, you could not heat water, you could not dry soaked clothing, you could not create the protective bubble of warmth that humans take for granted today. Instead, your body became your primary source of heat. Groups likely slept close together, sharing body warmth, reducing heat loss, protecting the most vulnerable members of the group: infants, children, the elderly. In many ways, warmth itself became a collective effort, and this reveals something fascinating. Many of the behaviors we associate with human kindness may also have had practical survival value. Helping others was not always separate from helping yourself. In a harsh environment, the success of the group often determined the survival of the individual. But there is something even more surprising. Despite all these difficulties, early humans were not merely enduring the world, they were gradually becoming better at living in it. Generation after generation, they accumulated knowledge. They learned which foods were safest, which routes were reliable, which seasons were dangerous, which locations offered protection. Unlike most animals, humans could pass that knowledge forward. Parents taught children, experienced adults guided younger members. Information became an inheritance. And that inheritance may have been every bit as valuable as physical strength. Yet even with cooperation, memory, and adaptability, there remained a limit to what humans could achieve. A limit that affected where they could live, what they could eat, and how much energy they could obtain from the world around them. And eventually, somewhere in the distant past, a discovery began changing all of that. Not overnight, not everywhere at once, but slowly enough that nobody living through it could have imagined the consequences. The discovery was fire, and once humans learned to control it, the story of our species entered an entirely new chapter. And this is where the story becomes surprisingly personal, because at first glance, the world of early humans seems completely disconnected from your own. You have electricity, climate control, supermarkets, instant communication, a comfortable bed waiting for you at the end of the day. Your ancestors had none of these things. Yet the more closely scientists study human evolution, the more they discover that many features of modern life are not entirely new inventions. They are ancient solutions wrapped in modern technology. Think about your home. Right now, it feels like a place of comfort, a place that protects you from rain, cold, heat, and danger. But thousands of generations ago, we're already searching for exactly the same thing: not luxury, protection. A safe place where a family could rest, recover, and survive until morning. The materials changed. The purpose never did. Or think about your winter jacket. You probably don't see it as a piece of survival equipment. But in a sense, that is exactly what it is. For countless generations, humans relied on animal hides, layered materials, and ingenious adaptations to trap body heat. Modern synthetic fabrics may look different from ancient furs, but both solve the same problem. How do you stay warm when nature does not care whether you survive? Even something as ordinary as dinner carries the fingerprints of your distant ancestors. Every cooked meal represents one of the most important transformations in human history. When you boil water, bake bread, or cook vegetables, you are using a discovery that changed the trajectory of our species. You are participating in a process that began hundreds of thousands of years ago when humans first learned to control heat. But perhaps the most surprising connection is not technological at all, it is social. Think about how often you depend on other people. Friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, experts you have never met. The modern world often celebrates independence, yet your life depends on cooperation every single day. The food in your kitchen was produced by thousands of strangers. The roads you travel were built by people you will never know. The knowledge you use was accumulated by generations that came before you. And in many ways, that reality began long before civilization. The same cooperation that helped early humans watch for predators, share food, and protect children still shapes your life today. The scale is larger. The principle is the same. This may be the most important lesson hidden within the story of life before fire. Human beings did not survive because they were the fastest animals. They were not the strongest. They were not the best hunters. They survived because they learned to work together, share knowledge, and adapt faster than the challenges around them could destroy them. Fire eventually amplified those abilities, but it did not create them. The foundations were already there, and perhaps that is why this story matters. Because when you look at modern humanity, it is easy to focus on skyscrapers, computers, satellites, and artificial intelligence. But beneath all of those achievements is the same species that once sat together in darkness, listening carefully to the sounds of the night, and hoping to see another sunrise. The technology changed, the human story did not. And that realization brings us to a final question. If our ancestors managed to survive a world without fire, what does that reveal about the resilience that still exists inside us today? The next time you light a candle, start a campfire, or simply turn on your stove, take a moment to think about how extraordinary that act really is. Because for most of human history, fire was not guaranteed. It was not waiting at the push of a button. It was not stored in a lighter, hidden in a match, or flowing through a gas line. It was something precious, something difficult to obtain, something that changed the destiny of our species. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is not what happened after humans mastered fire. It is what happened before. Long before flames illuminated the night, your ancestors were already solving impossible problems. They survived cold without heaters, darkness without electricity, danger without walls, hunger without kitchens. They crossed landscapes filled with uncertainty and somehow found a way forward. Generation after generation, century after century, millennium after millennium. Every human being alive today exists because those people succeeded. Not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly. If even a few generations had failed, your story would never have begun. And that may be the greatest lesson hidden inside the distant past. Human beings were never defined by comfort. We were defined by adaptation, the ability to learn, to cooperate, to pass knowledge from one generation to the next, to face challenges that seemed impossible and slowly transform them into opportunities. Fire became one of humanity's greatest tools, but it was not the source of our resilience. It was the result of it. The flame came after the determination, after the curiosity, after the countless generations who refused to disappear. In a way, every modern convenience around you is a monument to those forgotten ancestors. The warm room you sit in, the meal you eat tonight, the light shining above your head, all of it rests upon an unbroken chain of survival stretching back into a world without fire. A world where people who looked remarkably like you stared into the darkness and chose to keep going. And perhaps that is why their story still matters. Because when life feels uncertain, when challenges seem overwhelming, it helps to remember something simple. You are descended from survivors, from people who endured winters without heat, nights without light, and dangers we can barely imagine today. The same species that learned to live before fire is still here, still adapting, still learning, still finding ways forward. And that story is far from over. If you enjoyed this journey into humanity's deep past, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories about evolution, survival, and the incredible lives of our ancestors. This is Duke Psychology, and until next time, keep exploring the story of what it truly means to be human. Before you click away, take a moment to look around you. The warmth in your home, the food in your kitchen, the light above your head. Every one of these comforts exists because countless generations survived a world that was colder, darker, and far more uncertain than our own. Their struggles became your inheritance. Their discoveries became your everyday life. And there are thousands more incredible stories hidden in humanity's past stories of survival, evolution, psychology, and the remarkable journey that turned a vulnerable primate into the species that would reshape an entire planet. If you enjoy exploring the deep history of humanity and uncovering the science behind who we are, make sure to subscribe to Duck Psychology, turn on notifications, and join our growing community of curious minds. Because every week we travel back through time to discover one fascinating truth. The story of ancient humans is really the story of us. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next journey on Duck Psychology.